welcome you to this video program. This video program has certain objectives, and these objectives are as follows. In this video program, we are going to discuss briefly about what development is and what are its various dimensions. We will also focus on the need of the holistic development, and lastly we will examine the role of a teacher in facilitating the development. See, as you all know, development is a process which involves a series of progressive changes and that occur in an orderly and predictable pattern as a result of maturation and experience. So when I say that it is an orderly series, which means the development follows certain pattern, right? But this pattern comes out as the result of maturation. So therefore, any change which happens as a result of development is relatively permanent in nature. It is not temporary. So you might observe, when you fall ill, then you feel little lethargic or fatigued during that time. That is also a change, but that change is temporary. It is not permanent. So therefore, it will not come into the category of development. So hence, when you call development, it involves changes which are progressive in nature. That means they will start from the birth of the child to the death. So it is a continuous process. So what does that mean then? That means as a teacher, we have to look development as a progressive process. Now when we talk about development, we know that development has got many dimensions like physical development, cognitive development, emotional, social and moral development. So when you talk about physical development, it involves the changes in the body of the individual physically, which means changes in the height and the weight of the individual. So you would find that a small child has lesser weight, less height, and as we grow progressive towards the age, we develop and we increase in terms of weight and height, and these are the parameters of the physical development. If you talk about cognitive development, it is more related to changes in the thinking, right? So as a child, the development of a child and the development of an adult, cognitively, they will be both different, because as the child develops or progresses in age, there is a certain sense of maturity and experiences which an individual gains, which impacts the cognitive ability of an individual, right? So another thing is the emotional development. Emotional development involves, we all face all kind of emotions in our life, both negative and positive. How well we deal with the negative as well as the positive emotions, how balanced are we emotionally, that indicates our development emotionally. When you talk about social development, we as human beings, we all are social beings, and we all would want to interact with others. So in social development, we see that whether an individual is able to place herself better in the social surrounding, whether she is able to adjust in the social surrounding outside her family, right? So those are the indicators of the social development. So the last dimension is the moral development, again weighing what is correct and what is not correct. But whenever you talk about these dimensions, you cannot say that an individual can grow or can develop well in one dimension and not in other. It cannot happen. So therefore, the development is more of a holistic process. So as a teacher, what you have to look, your aim has to be the holistic development of an individual. That means you have to look into the entirety. That is, the development is taking place. It is the all-round development. The development is just not in one area. So as a teacher, you have to ensure that this development is going all in all the dimensions. Okay. So, but let us now go one by one into each of the dimension and understand what is your role there as a teacher. So when you talk about first dimension, that is the physical development dimension. So as a teacher, you have to look into that your learners, they develop physically well. Now what can you do for that? You can ensure the proper physical development of your students by having a regular healthcare programs in your school, and those healthcare programs of course have to be age appropriate. Let me give you one example. When you develop a health program, or when any school develops a health program for a child, for a primary school child, they have to ensure about their oral health, meaning whether the children are keeping good care of their teeth or not. They have to inculcate those values so that they become physically healthy. So which means that as a teacher, you have to ensure that there are regular, apart from having regular health care education program, you have to ensure that there is a differential treatment which is also given to the student, which is appropriate to their developmental stage. So which implies that any kind of a healthcare program which you develop has to be age appropriate. It cannot fit, one healthcare program cannot fit the children of all the groups, right? And apart from that, of course, you have to highlight the need of having the adequate nutrition. As a teacher, you may not be having lot of control over nutrition, that what kind of food the child is having at home, but yes, of course, as a teacher you can ensure that they have this understanding that what is a nutritious food, what comprises nutritious food, which food item they should avoid and which they should take for ensuring a good physical development. The next dimension, which is very, very important for you as a teacher, that is the cognitive development of the child. So if you talk, as I already discussed in the starting, that cognitive development is nothing but it is about changes in the patterns of thinking, how an individual processes the information which comes from outside, and then how the individual then processes it and makes it as a part of her own schema. But when you talk about cognitive development is influenced by a couple of factors. So as a teacher, you should ensure and you should know about what are the impacts of these factors on the cognitive development of the child. Let me just first focus on the first factor, that is the biological maturation. Biological maturation, as you would all know, this is all fixed, already fixed, because we all derive genes from our parents. So our genetic makeup is already fixed. But then again, as a teacher, you can ensure that the child take proper nutrition so that this biological makeup which is already given can remain healthier forever. Because if the body is healthy, of course, then only the mind can think very, very independently. If you are ill, your entire focus is on the illness. Our mental processes, our mental faculty does not work to their optimum, right? Another second influence is the activity. Activity meaning if a child is given or exposed to number of activity, they get a chance to manipulate with the objects, they get a chance to experience different kinds of objects, and that in turn gives a lot of confidence in children. You might have observed that small children, they find it difficult to balance themselves, but as they grow or as they mature more muscularly, then their balance capacity that improves. So when the balance capacity improves, then their ability to manipulate the object also improves. So therefore activity is always dependent on the maturation, the biological maturation. But if a child is given a lot of exposure in terms of providing a number of activities, then the cognitive development, it will provide a fertile field for the cognitive development. So therefore it is a very, very important aspect. As a teacher, you have to engage your learners in some meaningful activity. You have to challenge their thinking capacities so that they can think beyond, out of the box, and they can, apply the knowledge. The third important aspect which impacts our cognitive development are the social experiences which an individual receives. As I already discussed that as an individual, as a human being, we are all social in nature. So therefore, the nature of social experiences which an individual receives, that defines his thinking process. Okay. So as a teacher, I have to ensure, or you have to ensure, that you provide positive social experiences to the children so that they also develop cognitively well. Then there is another cognitive process called equilibration. See, whenever an individual receives any kind of information from outside, what happens? That information creates a disequilibrium in the mind, because that may be a new information for the child. So what happens? The current understanding of the child, there is a disequilibration between the two, the new and the old one. But in order to get an understanding, in order to develop an understanding, equilibration is required. So there is a constant process of equilibration going on, so that the student or the child gets the information and they can process it well according to the experiences which they have had. Now, if you talk about, I've talked about the impacts of, or the influences of the cognitive development. Now, as a teacher, what you can do for improving the cognitive development of the child? First is, you have to provide opportunities to the learners. Opportunities for what? Opportunity to explore many hypotheses for a problem, which implies that as a teacher you have to provide opportunity to the students so that they can manipulate with number of hypotheses to solve a particular problem. Okay. Another thing is that you have to also give them ample of chance to again manipulate with the objects, because if you don't give them any kind of an opportunity, then their thinking will not start. So in order to ignite the thinking of the individuals, you have to provide them a lot of varied experiences. Then you have to teach them broader concepts, just not facts. If you just give them factual information about a certain concept, what will happen? They will only get a factual understanding. But we want our students to mature cognitively. So it is important that we provide them much broader conceptual understandings to our learners. Then the strategies which you should adopt is that there should be a constant dialogue and between you and your learners, and also amongst the peers, and there should be a lot of group learning. So therefore, any kind of a project which you give to your student, give them an opportunity to work together, to work collaboratively, because when they collaboratively work together, then a lot of thinking, a group thinking goes on. There are lot many questions, lot many answers, lot many brainstormings which are happening, and when all this happen, this helps the learners to actually think of understanding, actually think of, even understanding the broader meaning of the concept. And also you have to keep scaffolding their needs. You have to keep supporting them in terms of, whenever they get stuck, you have to provide them more examples, whenever, and then don't provide them direct examples. You have to give them cues so that they can independently solve the problem. Next comes the social development. As we all know, that social development would involve, how we approach to others in a group, how we interact with others appropriately, and there is an important value which has to be, learned, that is of sharing and the cooperation. And when you say you want to develop a child socially, then they must also understand the individual differences and also should have an ability to handle the differences. That is very, very important. Any kind of a differences, whether it is negative or positive, they should be able to take those differences, because then only they will be able to expand their horizons. Now, what can a teacher do to develop a positive social development? See, we all know there is always, amongst the adolescents, there is a sense of, there is a quest, there is a continuous sense of in the search for their own identity. So, you have to provide them, place, and you have to appreciate their individuality so that they can form their identity. Second thing is, you have to develop the competence as well as the social competence. These are two different things. When I say competence to solve the problems, right? So, and social competence, this dealing with the problems of the social groups. So, unless the student doesn't know how to solve a problem, his own individual problem, then it will be very difficult to understand the problems of others, and they will also not be able to become socially that competent to solve the problem within the group. So, therefore, as a teacher, you must provide the opportunity for applying their social competence. So, there should be a lot of social learning happening in the class. Then there is another important aspect of development, that is the socio-emotional development. You call it as emotional development also. When you say socio-emotional competence, it means that an individual, where a learner is socially competent as well as they are emotionally very strong. When I say emotionally very strong, that means they have positive emotions in them, and they are also able to deal with the negative emotions. They should have an ability to deal with both the highs and the lows. So, which means that we as a teacher, we must ensure towards developing an individual who is emotionally stable. Now, for that, what can you do? The first and the foremost thing is that in a class, you have to develop a climate of trust. When a student enters into a class, the student must feel that in this class I can solve, I can talk about my problems, I can point out to the teacher that, look, I have not understood this point, my teacher is going to listen. So, that trust you have to develop in the class. When that trust develops, what happens? Eventually the student, they come up on their own with their emotions, and simultaneously they also develop the social competence too. Another thing is that again I am stressing more and more on developing an individual socially more, because if they are socially competent, then they will be emotionally strong too. So, for becoming that, it is important that you should help your students to recognize their feelings. Many a times you would find that the student may not be even aware of how are they feeling about a particular thing. They may be angry, but they are not able to show their anger. They may be, frustrated, they may not be able to show their frustration. And what happens because of that, if they are not able to show their true self, sometimes they become so introvert that they stop participating in the class. So therefore, you have to, as a teacher, you have to help them in recognizing their feelings and also recognizing their emotion. You have to tell them it is all right to feel bad about the thing which is not as per your choice, and it is all right to show your anger, but of course it has to be done in the realistic limits. Then as a teacher, you must ensure that you give them a lot of strategies to cope up with their emotions, because emotions are very different. If you talk about from a child, a small child, a pre-primary child to a secondary child. A pre-primary child may show a tantrum, he may not concentrate into the class, and he may feel that it is okay to make noise in the class, and sometimes they are too overjoyous. So you have to tell them that within the class what are the rules of the class and how to show the emotions, where to show the emotions, what are the limits of showing the emotions. Similarly, you can also apply it to the students of the secondary classes. Another important aspect is that our classes are multicultural classrooms, pluralistic classrooms. So we find students coming from different backgrounds, they have different ethnicity at times, and they have got different cultural backgrounds. But we must make sure that the students coming from different cultural background, they are welcomed, and the other students who are there, they should also be able to welcome them. So in order to welcome them, what is important, that as a teacher you can always tell them about the different cultures and the different cultural differences which exist in different cultures. So that way, when a student gets to know about different culture, they start accepting it, they start valuing it, and they feel that it is all right to have cultural differences, and we have to accept all with all those cultural differences. This is another thing. Another very important point is that we have to see that we differ in our perspectives. Why? Because we come with different social background, we come with different experiences. So therefore, it is but natural to have differences in our perspectives. So we have to make our student understand that in order to be socially more compliable in the classroom, it is always good to listen to others, to listen to other perspectives, and by listening to others' perspective, it does not mean that your perspective will not be taken into consideration. So the idea about having a differences in the perspective, that idea is very important. That you have to give it to your learners, and that you have to make sure that they understand and they see perspective or differences not as a difference, but as as an opportunity to discuss, that they must look into. So this is how you can ensure the socio-emotional competence. And the last thing, when you talk about moral development of the students, there are many psychologists like Kohlberg, Gilligan, they have talked about the moral development and how to ensure. See, moral development is when you see something is right or wrong as per the norms. So we have to say, we have to make our learners understand that there are many a times they may face moral dilemmas about many issues. So you have to help them in navigating through those moral dilemmas. and you have to also make sure, as a teacher, you have to make them understand that these moral dilemmas are all right. We may face it as far as we are able to sail through it. So overall, you can say that as a teacher, you have to ensure that you help the students to develop cognitively, socially, emotionally so very well that they come out as an holistic individual and contribute to the development of the society. Thank you very much.